Now, I have to start with full disclosure as we continue to talk about the Hulu documentary, The Secrets of Hillsong. I was majorly and positively impacted by Hillsong as a church through the years. Now, watching this expose has been a pretty brutal experience for me, and I can't be alone. Hillsong music was absolutely huge, and not just in the church world, but in the world at large. There has to be listeners who have loved what they did and now feel betrayed and disillusioned when their underbelly of the church is exposed in such an ugly way. Now, how do you deal with the disillusionment? It makes you feel so gullible. You have to be asking yourself, was what I experienced through what they did, real? Or was it just another case of wishful thinking? Those are hard questions, and no one likes to feel duped. Well, I think I qualify as someone who can speak to this in a way that's more than just clinical, a way that's actually personal, but also biblical at the same time. And here's why. Because their music inspired the founding of what became One Life. One of my all-time favorite worship moments in life was when I got to go see their first true superstar worship leader. Her name is Darlene Zschech. I got to see her live, and she was the one who inspired what would become our church through her songwriting and her full-on, passionate, amazing worship anthems. One Life began as a worship team. We used to watch Hillsong videos for inspiration. We read her book, Extravagant Worship, as this guidance system for what we wanted to become. She inspired us to pursue Jesus deeply and strive to lead others to a deeper devotional worship. That's why I went to see her, and she didn't disappoint. When she first came out on the stage, you're thinking, back in those days, that's Darlene Zschech, she's a celebrity worship leader, and so you're kind of in awe of her. But before the second song, she had this presence about her that you genuinely were pointed to Jesus. You stopped caring about Darlene Zschech. You just wanted to praise Jesus and do it extravagantly. That was a very real thing. I'll never forget it. Now, at One Life, we wanted to be a Hillsong for our corner of the world. We wrote songs, we practiced, we prayed for the right kind of excellence. We had enough connection with them to have a Hillsong staff person who worked with Darlene personally come and help train us and mentor us. I went to their concerts. We did a lot of their songs because their songs were fantastic. I can remember moments when we played their songs and it was like heaven and earth were intermingling. We developed a heart for the nations, which matched their heart for the nations. They were going into places, they were planting churches where no one else could plant churches, like Paris, London, Kyiv, Johannesburg, and yes, New York City. Myself and some of our team attended their New York City church within the first couple of years that they opened. Now, does that mean that we bought the whole package? No. Honestly, and I think this was a mistake, I didn't pay much attention to their senior pastor at all. For us, like a whole lot of people, it was the music that really got our attention. And that was no small thing. Their music had that certain something that we wanted to express, and they gave us a way to express it. The question becomes, now that I know what I know, do I think it was a mistake to do that? Well, I'm a solid maybe on that. Now, the reason I say it that way is I've been mentored and inspired by others who fell as well. For example, I was a huge Ravi Zacharias fan. His fall still hurts me every time I think of it. Does it make me wrong for having been a fan at all? I don't think that's reasonable, and I don't think it's biblical either. If someone falls, it's not evidence that they were simply phony the whole time, but we have to face reality at the same time. The Secrets of Hillsong as a documentary is a serious indictment of the church, and more importantly, their senior pastor. What do you do with the disillusionment with all of that? Well, let me give you a few principles that I think can be helpful. Number one, face the brutal facts, but never lose hope. And this is a line I learned from a business book many years ago, and it's a great summary for a lot of life situations. I believe in being optimistic, but optimism can often mean ignore reality. That's why the combination contained in the statement is so important. Christians should be people devoted to the truth, and the truth is what is. And what that means is how things actually are. It's about facts as they stand, the good, the bad, and the stuff that puts the ugh in ugly. There's undeniable brutal facts about Hillsong shared in the documentary, and there's no reason not to face them. The facts are there are eyewitnesses who felt exploited, saw abuses, and accountants who have demonstrated financial violations of integrity. Add to that the problem of trying to cover up things, which spirals things down the drain even more. If the evidence is strong, follow the evidence, even if it leads you to a place you don't want to go. Now, I didn't want those things to be true, but if the weight of the evidence falls in that direction, truth and integrity demand that I go there. But that's where never losing hope comes in. If Jesus rose from the dead, hope is never lost. Now, and I don't mean that as a cliched, lightweight, don't look at people, look at Jesus kind of thing. I'm saying we have to keep in mind, because of Jesus' resurrection, we can know that what he said about life, the church, death, and heaven is true, no matter how stupid things get down here. Number 2, never forfeit your call to discern and test. You're not obligated to simply believe something just because it claims to be from God. Christianity does not operate like a cult. As Jesus followers, we have a beautiful and encouraging call to test things, to not be deceived. Jesus himself said, watch out. That's not only a warning, it's a liberating principle, but it's also a tacit admission that deception is very possible. He wouldn't have said, watch out, if there wasn't anything to watch out for. So we shouldn't be surprised by deceptive or distorted things happening in his name. Number 3. What begins good can still end in a train wreck. Now, that's the disappointing reality. I'm on the side that thinks of Hillsong as beginning well and later going off the rails. Now, the reason for that is I saw a lot of good fruit and Jesus-centered, life-changing impact as they were on the rise. People I met and were exposed to, experiences I had were good in the truest sense. But the more I've seen organizations and the individuals who have followed that pattern, it proves the old saying, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's as true as anything in life. I believe there's this tipping point in the life of organizations and churches, and I've seen this across the theological spectrum, by the way, where the whole endeavor gives more power to individuals than they're equipped to handle. The older I get, the more I'm convinced all the time that there's only so much power and influence a person could wield before cracking under the weight. Number 4, sometimes seeds of destruction can be seen long before the destruction itself. Okay, so here's a confession on all this. I will admit that I should have been more cautious about Hillsong because I knew they were into the prosperity gospel thing. And now, coming from a charismatic background, I've given some of those ministries a free pass because they didn't seem weird about it or driven by it necessarily. They just believed that God's work in someone's life would bless and benefit them beyond just spiritually. But in the end, if I'm being honest, I need to join the voices calling that whole thing a full-on heresy. First of all, it's biblically shallow. Second, it sets you up to get caught up in the very things that Brian Houston and the Hillsong team got lost in. The documentary ends with the Australian government presenting evidence that Houston and his family used church money to give themselves lavish stuff like diamond rings and vacations in Cancun. With the prosperity theological mindset, that sin of greed is as predictable as the sunrise. And if your belief system gets you to the place where you can justify those kinds of extravagant expenditures with church funds, you can justify a whole lot more. And we need to remember, that is the nature of their error and all of our errors. When it comes to sin and moral compromise, they function on the principle of justification. That means we rarely do wrong things we know are wrong. Rather, we figure out how something that would be wrong to anyone on the outside, it's right in our particular case in that particular time. That's why the Cancun vacations. We work hard. We're leaders of the church. We deal with a lot of pressure. We're enjoying the fruits of the ministry. Brian Houston covered up his dad's sexual abuse. And I'm sure he thought things like, well, he's my dad. It was just one-time thing years and years ago, and it didn't happen too much. He's too important to punish in this ruinous way. We'll take care of it, and on it goes. But if you train yourself to think that way, instead of just letting the Bible speak to you from the outside and provide guidelines, you'll end up doing the same kinds of things. Never underestimate your own ability to justify sin. Now, I hate seeing all of this stuff, and I believe there are Jesus-centered people at Hillsong. They're still there, and I'm hoping this trial and expose will provide the right kind of correctives for them to be restored, and I hope you can be restored as well. Hope that helps. Don't forget to hit like if you liked it and subscribe.